was listening to some news, I was listening to the radio, to Bloomberg, and Brian Chesky came on. And I don't know if you guys know who Brian Chesky is. He's the founder of Airbnb. And Brian started talking about how Airbnb trips use the same structure as a Hollywood film. You start at home, you get called to go out on an adventure, you go on a journey, et cetera, et cetera. And this is to say that by now, the story structure that Hollywood has thrived on has become so successful that it's now influencing Airbnb and Microsoft and Salesforce. It's now become more than just a story structure for films. It's now a story structure for brand journeys, product journeys, sales journeys, campaigns, you name it. Today we're going to focus on films, but I want to talk about just at the beginning just how influential this conversation is. The study of we'll say the hero's journey for now, and we'll flip it on its head a little bit later, but the study of the hero's journey has been basically now at this point reached virtually every studio in Hollywood, every billion-dollar franchise, and most major filmmakers. So I want to start by telling you a little bit about the story of how this became so influential. And as this famous story goes, it starts with George Lucas coming across Hero with a Thousand Faces when he was a student at USC. He would later say he could have never written Star Wars had he not found Hero with a Thousand Faces, and then he has since donated the Joseph Campbell Chair to the USC Film School. Then Steven Spielberg picks it up, his friend, and then Joseph Campbell starts coming to Skywalker Ranch to record a documentary series with Bill Moyers for PBS, and then the rest is history. By now, at that point, the word is out, and leading filmmakers start to work with this model. Why? What is this model? Why would George Lucas be interested in mythology? So Joseph Campbell had studied, he's a mythologist, one of the most influential, most brilliant mythologists of all time. He studied the most powerful stories that have ever been written, that have ever been experienced. And he said, what's consistent between these stories? And what he started to see is that there is some consistency in pattern, that characters tend to start in a type of stasis or comfort zone. They get called or disrupted from that comfort zone to go on some type of journey. They often meet a mentor and eventually cross a threshold and go into the other world. From here, they start to learn and train in a new experience. They get something special from that other world, and they come back and they save the day upon the delivery of that special elixir. So this is the story structure from myth that Joseph Campbell had found going through, coming from a long conversation of people who are trying to make sense of why stories are powerful. And this goes all the way back to Aristotle's Poetics in Athens. So this study of myth and what makes myth powerful would then come up against the arts, and the arts would want various creatives, and this, of course, George Lucas is a famous story, but let's go back a few clicks. Before George Lucas found Hero with a Thousand Faces, Jim Morrison had found it, of The Doors. So when you hear, break on through to the other side, that is crossing the threshold. That's a motif introduced by Joseph Campbell. So what we're going to find is that by the time this structure had influenced Hollywood, it had already influenced major musicians, abstract artists, incredible dancers. But we're going to focus today, again, just on this model of and how it's influenced filmmakers. So now we're back in history, and we've got filmmakers like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, George Miller, major filmmakers in the 70s and 80s that are using this model. Then you have this guy named Chris Vogler come across the book when he's at USC. USC professor points him towards it. And then what he does is there's this other lineage. There's this lineage of mythologists trying to make sense of myth, but then there's also this lineage of storytellers trying to make better stories. And so he fuses these lineages together. And so he takes these story structure books like Sid Field's screenwriting, and he bends it together with the study of myth. And this is what these Hollywood filmmakers had already kind of been doing, and he formalized it while he was working at Disney. He ends up helping them write some story for Lion King and some other films, and this work, which is called The Writer's Journey, becomes one of the most influential books in the history of Hollywood. Later, you end up with some guy named Blake Snyder writes Save the Cat, and whether it's Save the Cat, The Writer's Journey, or Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, all three of these books are teaching this narrative structure that's coming from the work of Joseph Campbell. And all three of these books are the most assigned books in film programs. And the reason why is because every screenwriter at some point has to learn the hero's journey. I had a wonderful opportunity to do an interview with Vanessa Taylor, who's one of the screenwriters for Game of Thrones and Shape of Water. And she said that she had to learn all this story structure, and then now, deep into her professional career, she tries to forget it and let it go. It's built in. It's instinct now. So hopefully it will become instinct for you someday, but it has to start as learning. In the Zen tradition, they say you want to unleash a tamed mind. That when you start with beginner's mind, shoot the target. Okay, great. Shot the target, hit the bullseye, nailed it, amazing. I didn't even think about what I was doing. Next time I go to shoot, what was I doing? And now I've messed up that perfect, clear mind of just doing it, right? That's beginner's mind. So you want to teach your mind how to be a better shot. But ultimately, in the end, you want to get back to that beginner's mind. You want to release yourself. So we're going to go through some structure, and I want you guys to realize this is not going to do it we're going to teach you for an hour. If this is a 45-hour class that I normally teach, and this is a lifetime of learning. I had a chance to talk, for example, with the writer of RoboCop and Starship Troopers. And he says he's still, every time he watches a good movie, he's breaking down the narrative structures of the films. So it is a lifelong study to become better and better worker of story and story structure. So it's going to be a quick introduction today. Like I said, normally it's a 45-hour course, and we're just going to pick up whatever pieces come as we go through the track in this 1 hour. So the hero's journey, super influential. Every billion-dollar franchise. Now we're looking at Dan Harmon, who does, of course, Rick and Morty and Community, is a big supporter of the story circle of the hero's journey, right? Then we have people like Christopher Nolan talking about Batman Begins as a hero's journey, or Jon Favreau talking about Iron Man as a hero's journey, and of course that gave birth to all of the Marvel franchises. I don't know how old all of y'all are, but Marvel's didn't used to be studios. Iron Man was not made under Marvel Studios. That was born out and became a very successful thing, and then was eventually bought by Disney. So the success of the hero's journey is now off the charts. It's used everywhere. Everybody has to learn it. But there's a big but. And that's what I want to talk about today. I don't want to just teach you this thing. I want to get into something very important. One of my mentors is a woman named Maria Tatar, Dean of the Humanities at Harvard, chair of their Myth and Folklore department. She just wrote a book called Heroine of 1,001 Faces. And what she's saying is that Hero of 1,000 Faces, the hero's journey, leaves out a lot of femininity, leaves out a lot about the feminine journey. Another one of my good friends, Clyde Ford, wrote a book, Hero with an African Face, and he's saying, look, Joseph Campbell, I value the work, but where are the African voices? And then there's this other major problem. Does the hero's journey just inflate us into big heroes? Do we need more heroic people out there? Do we need more big inflated egos? And is the hero's journey just pumping up bigger egos? And then we have the problem, is the hero's journey just creating martyrs? People like the Russian troops right now who are just following orders, trying to be heroes for their country. So there are some sincere problems with the hero's journey. And so now what we're looking at is, on one hand, this is one of the most influential recipes from which our world is built. There's this amazing line when American Film Institute was financed. The president financing it at the time quoted a psalm when he said that our artists provide a nation with vision, and without a vision, a nation will perish. This is the power of myth and storytelling. We live into our stories. Alexander the Great took the Iliad with him everywhere he went. One of the most influential historical figures of all time was inspired by a story. He identified with Achilles. We still identify with our heroes, and we always will. We pattern our world as fantasy and in our minds before we make it true in reality. The world in our minds, the world in our fantasies is real. And it is from that everything else comes. So, we've got this incredibly powerful story structure that everybody seems to be using. It's patterning our reality, but it's marginalizing people. It's leaving out the feminine. It's leaving out African and African-American voices. It may or may not be inflating egos. So that's what I want to do. That's the starting place for us, is that it is super important. You have to learn it, but it might be very damaging. So we can't, when the Grail Knights go on quest, they don't follow a guide. When the Grail Knights go on quest, they have to enter the forest where it's darkest, which, by the way, you see happen in The Force Awakens, which is a reference to Joseph Campbell making that point, that the Grail Knight has to go into the forest where there is no path. And so, of course, you see Rey go into a forest where there is no path. And I really appreciate the fact that J.J. Abrams is bringing in more of Joseph Campbell's work than just the hero's journey. That's an aside. But that's us. We need to do something. We cannot just receive the wisdom of our parents. We've got to think for ourselves. We've got to push this further. We can't accept the recipe that's been building the world that we're not willing to accept. We have to rework the recipe. So what I want to do now is I want to go through the journey, but as we do, I want to make sure that we bring in voices and bring in myths that are more representative of different cultures, different genders, and I want to call y'all to go way further than we possibly can in this conversation. Okay, so now's your chance to bail. We are going to dive in now. We're going to go through the journey. We're going to cross the threshold and enter into this wild adventure, really. And before we do, I want you to know what we're going to do. We're going to look at some of the world's most powerful myths, Osiris, Inanna, Persephone. We're going to look at some stories like Alice, Neo, and The Matrix. We're going to look at some religious philosophies will come out of Buddhism. So we're going to go on quite an adventure, and it's going to be a little bit overwhelming. And if you guys want to save that for another stage in your development, now's the time. Otherwise, I'd like to play the first clip, and we'll jump right into the first stage.
Step 13, enjoy popular music.
Top the charts again, it's Everything Is Awesome.
Oh my gosh, I love this song.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when we're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we're living our dream.
Always use a turn signal. Park between the lines. Yes. Drop off dry cleaning before noon. Read the headlines. Don't forget to smile. Always root for the local sports team.
Go sports team!
Always return a compliment. Hey, you look nice.
So do you.
Drink overpriced coffee.
There you go. That's $37.
Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Did you see where are my pants last night?
Classic episode.
Everything is awesome.
Instructions coming in from Central. Okay, it says here to take everything weird and blow it up. All right, Silverhead. Let's make it look exactly like it does in the instructions. Hey, buddy, I need a 1x2 keyhole.
No problem, Michael.
2x2 macaroni over here.
2x2 macaroni flying in. Here's one, Mel.
Cheese floats, come on, everybody.
Roger that, Roger.
Coming at you.
Can I get a couple LARPs over here?
Thanks, Gail.
Hey guys, watch me drill this down.
Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome. And you heard the news, everyone's talking. Life is good because everything's awesome.
Man, I feel so good right now. I could sing this song for hours.
Everything is awesome.
When you're part of a team.
Super fun. I'm sure some of y'all were singing along. It is a great and enjoyable, very fun part of that story. But that nails so many elements of the starting place of where a good story starts, where the hero's journey and these various story structures would say you should start or can start successfully a powerful story. So first of all, we notice that he starts in home. He's in his home world, in his home. So we start in a comfort zone, the starting of a story before anything happens, before we're called to adventure or grow or change. We're not growing. We're in a state of non-growth. Remember when it says anything crazy or anything that's odd, blow it up. right? This is a place where we're going to have a very routine, very normal reality. And this is going to be in contrast to a very different and odd reality. So first, it's going to be home, a normal reality. Often, we're going to set up that normality with lots of routines. So we see the daily routine built in, very common for the opening of a story. We're introducing what Karl Marx would call the status quo. The story, the situation as it is right now, the status now. How are things right now? So we're going to introduce the story. And in the status quo, we might as well call it the stasis quo. What is the static nature of this world? We start a story with an egg. We start with nothing is happening. It's stuck. There is no growth. There's need for growth. Otherwise, why would we want a story? Story is going to be a journey of growth. So we need to have a starting place from which to grow. So this is all about setups. The beginning is all about setting things up, setting up the arc. So you're going to set up all the inversions, right? So there's no imagination in the beginning. It's going to be all about imagination in the end. We're going to start at home. We're going to go on an adventure into another more imaginal world from which we're going to come back with this new attitude, with this new creativity, which is going to redeem and save the day. But we'll get to that in a minute. So first of all, home, normal, routine, status quo. This is the world before the story. This is the comfort zone. This is the place where there's a resistance to change. Status quo, this is a place of repression. So when we live in a comfort zone, when we live at home, parents want to shelter you, right? They don't want you to know about all these other things that they don't want in your childhood, in your comfort zone. This is the womb of safety. This is the home of safety. This is the campus of safety. This is the job of safety. This is the relationship of safety. All those places of static safety and comfort that you don't want to leave. This is Eden. This is the Buddha in his palace before he's called to adventure. This is Neo on the farm. This is Dorothy on the farm. This is Alice before she goes down the rabbit hole. This is Wendy in the nursery. This is the comfortable reality. This is the Lego world, and everybody's following the same routine, normal, status quo, common sense, comfort. But to do that, they have to be repressing something else, repressing the imagination, repressing the shadow, repressing the unknown, repressing the other, repressing everything that is not consistent with that static comfort that we cling to. Now, this is psychological. There's a place in us. We don't want to go into our nightmares. We don't want to go into our hurt. We don't want to go into our great talents that we've never explored. There's a lot of ourself beneath the surface. But we start on the surface of who we say we are. What's the surface of who we say we are? That's our persona. That's our face. That's our mask. That's what we show the world. And in the beginning of a story, characters often identify with who they tell the world they are. The ego, the self, is identifying with the persona. And that's going to have to crack because the persona is such a limited version of all that you are. You are so much more than who you say you are to other people. And once you start to limit your idea of who you are to who you tell other people you are, now at some point there's going to be so much overwhelmingly valuable stuff you're leaving off the table that is going to break through. That's going to happen at an individual level, a collective cultural level, and it happens in stories. But before we get into that disruption, I want to talk a little bit about what's being disrupted. What is normal? Before we learn magic, before we learn the Force, before we learn our spider powers or develop our super suits, we have to establish a normality that's going to make magic magic, a natural that makes the supernatural super. So what is normal? What is this paradigm? This is actually a big part of the situation in our world right now, part of the problem. So we are still in a period where we still have a hangover from the belief that everything is made of atoms. Going back to the first birthplace of philosophy, the Eden of philosophy in Miletus, the first atomist, Leucippus, and then Democritus, putting forward this idea that everything is made up of atoms and a void. Everything is made up of things. Two things can't be in one place at one time. That's just the nature of things. Things are separate. They have boundaries. They're material and space. Atoms, matter, and space. That is a Lego world, right? That's why I picked this movie. There's so many good starts and introductions to stories, but Lego Movie particularly nails the paradigm that we have to get out of. This is a paradigm of dead nature, of dead matter. The idea that the world is dead and everything is made up of just material stuff, atoms. This turned our understanding of reality into a desert, into a wasteland, and we started to see and project it back onto ourselves. If the world's made of atoms, I'm made of atoms. If atoms are separated, I'm separated. And so now once you start to see yourself, you project the atom onto Adam, the first human. Now you're starting to see yourself as an isolation. But this is the foundational religious problem, philosophical problem, spiritual problem, existential problem, isolation, estrangement, to be estranged from God, the fall from Eden. This is, we all want to experience oneness with something, with humanity, with nature, with God, with the universe, with the divine, with a lover, with a friend. Oneness. We want to experience participation, but at the same time, we don't want to just feel isolated either. That gives us a sense of estrangement and despair, to be separated from Eden, for Prometheus to be separated at the precipice. So, that's the state we're in. We're in a normal world, a materialistic world, where everybody's filled up with these separate egos, these separate selves. We see ourselves as material, tiny little specks in a gargantuan universe that's inconsequential and all isolated, but that is a devastating perspective, and you look at most philosophical traditions, every religious tradition, and they're all trying to show you a path towards feeling participation, towards love, towards connection, towards getting beyond that sense of your own material, mortal, isolated estrangement. And so that's what we see in the Lego movie, is this paradigm of Legos. No imagination, no creativity, just building blocks, just like atoms. The world's made up of atoms, of Legos, of building blocks and billiard balls. But you see that, where's the invisible world? What about the waves? What about this thing? What we've learned since then is that this is floating on a sea of waves. Wi-Fi, electromagnetism. We didn't know about electromagnetism before. We didn't know about waves, really. There's a lot of invisibility that we had no idea about. So the known world is the visible world. The world we leave is the visible, known, obvious, surface reality. And we're going to get into the invisible. We're going to go into the dream. We're going to go into the night. We're going to go into the world of the dead. We're going to leave the citadel. We're going to leave home, and we're going to go on an adventure into a new place. And so that's what we're going to do next. Let's do this now. So can we show the next number 2 clip?
Long white rabbit. Who is it?
It's Joy.
Yeah. You're 2 hours late.
I know. It's her fault.
You got the money?
$2,000.
Hold up.
Hallelujah. You're my savior, man. My own personal Jesus Christ.
You get caught using that.
Yeah, I know. This never happened. You don't exist.
Right.
Something wrong, man? You look a little whiter than usual.
My computer, You ever have that feeling where you're not sure if you're awake or still dreaming?
All the time. It's called mescaline. It's the only way to fly. Hey, look, it just sounds to me like, you need to unplug, man. Get some R&R? Hey, what do you think, DeShore? Should we take him with us?
Definitely.
I can't. I have work tomorrow.
Come on. It'll be fun. I promise.
Yeah. Sure. I'll go.
All All right, so there you see Neo being called to adventure from his normal world where he's curious. He thinks there might be, so he wants to know what the Matrix is, which we're going to find out. But he is right now Mr. Anderson. He is working in a skyrise. He's living in a normal world, as we'll see in the next scene, when he doesn't wake up on time. But this is where you see a knock from the other side. First of all, how could something be knocking on his screen? That's not normal. This is a sign that we're going to be called out of normality. Something's knocking. Then he gets and he opens the door, of course, right? And they invite him to go on the journey. Come with us tonight. And then not only that, there you see her shoulder, the white rabbit, which is a reference, of course, to Alice in Wonderland. And we're going to see a clip of her going down the rabbit hole in just a moment. And you keep hearing Dorothy and all these different references to going into this other world. Now, why in The Matrix are you seeing this? Now, not only did The Matrix have a whole thing about how the hero's journey influenced them, but I had a student in one of my classes a few years ago at Hussian College, transfer student, transferred from Bard, which is where the Wachowskis went to school. And maybe 2 weeks into the class, he raises his hand. He's like, do you know about the class, the orientation at Bard? And I'm like, no, why would I, And he said, well, actually, at Bard, it's kind of a known thing that the Wachowskis participated in an orientation that many of us do, and my student had taken this class as well, where they introduce a lot of different ideas that you end up seeing in The Matrix, including that book where they open the book in that scene, Simulca and Simulcron, I say that wrong every time, all about simulation. That was supposedly right out of that class. And my student brings this up to say that he felt that the class that we were in the middle of was like that class. And that's the point, is we want to do the best version of that class there is, the best version of teaching story and myth with all of its power. And that is, why I was asked to come to Hussian College, because I teach this stuff and have a history of doing it for the Joseph Campbell Foundation with a PhD in mythology and incredible mentors. I've worked with Chris Fogler and Maria Tatar and Clyde Ford and the Blake Snyder crew and all the people that are leading this conversation. And we have to keep pushing it forward. Okay, so what you guys saw in that scene, you saw an inciting, the inciting incident's a little bit odd in that particular film. The inciting incident is when they find Neo. Now the whole situation, the stasis of the world, the stasis of the political environment is disrupted when Neo is found. So remember from the starting place that we start off in a kind of stasis and a balance and a status quo, right? Something's got to crack that egg. Something's got to break that wall. Think of it as like a meteor coming down and coming out of nowhere and making a difference and disrupting everything. Or, and I wanted to show the Peter Pan clip, but it's a little long. Peter Pan coming into the nursery. This is maybe my favorite example. And hi, Shadow, right? This is the story of Peter Pan, this shadow coming into the nursery and gets stuck in the nursery. So before we have Peter Pan and we're dealing with Peter in the nursery, first it's the shadow that's disrupting things. It's his shadow that's in the nursery. So the nursery is this comfort zone, this safe space, right? This childhood. And then soon now the shadow has come disrupting it. The shadow which represents all that we've repressed, all that we've pushed down, all that we are ignoring outside of the nursery, which is not just the bad. It's also vitality. It's also whatever we're marginalizing. It's also whatever we're leaving out that we have. And then when it won't be held out anymore, it comes through the window. It makes an opening. The unconscious breaks through consciousness and makes you see something you can't unsee. That's the shadow disrupting. Now, the shadow is a part of the psyche, according to Carl Jung, and this is the part of the psyche that you've repressed, that's now doesn't want to be repressed, it wants to be known. So it's going to come and disrupt. Now, the shadow might be your shadow, but it also might be a cultural shadow. Ask yourself, think about this. Has there ever been any disruption of cultural shadow? Have we ever repressed or marginalized a people or a gender to the point of them disrupting the world that's being created without them? That's how it works. It's going to happen that way in your psyche. It happens that way in our culture. And it will happen that way in film after film after film. And what Carl Jung found is that this shadow figure, when you look for the shadow in stories, It appears as a trickster. This is the Joker, so frequently a deranged and scary clown. That's not an original motif, an original character. The trickster, the scary clown, this is that part of yourself, the shadow that's been pushed out. Think about the Joker as a shadow. He's exactly what we're marginalizing. And then he's marginalized so far. Oh, sorry, no meds for your mental health. Oh, no care for your needs. Marginalized so far, the shadow pushed down so far that it comes and eventually disrupts. Sometimes this is very dangerous, and sometimes it's very healthy. Sometimes we need disruption. We need our limited self to break open so that we can integrate more, that we've been leaving out. So, for example, when Rosa Parks wouldn't get up and go to the back of the bus, this is a woman that's been marginalized, representing a people who have been marginalized, who are going right to that normal world where she's not supposed to be. And she has insisted on being there anyway. And by doing that, it was a trigger, it was an inciting incident, and it broke the thing, and it triggered a narrative. It triggered a story to unfold. That is shadow disruption. That's that thing that's been marginalized finally saying, no, I'm not going to sit in the back anymore. I'm going to be seen. That's shadow disruption. That's an inciting incident. And that will become a call to adventure to go on the journey. So that's what you see. We go from the normal world to a call to adventure, and that call to adventure is a disruption of that stasis, is an inciting incident. It is that which we've been repressed coming to the surface. It is a call to adventure, and it is a call to separate from that comfort zone, to separate from home, to separate from the womb. And in this way, the resistance is, you might say, Oedipal. What is Oedipal? What is the Oedipus complex? The Oedipus complex, let's leave aside the sexuality of it. This is about feeling the separation from mom and not wanting to be separated from mom. But why don't you want to be separated from mom? Because the first time you were ever separated from anything ever, it was a separation from mom. So mom represents this comfort zone, this safety. By extension, the home will represent this safety, and before that, the womb. And so our earliest experience of separation itself is from the womb, then from the mother, then from the home. So the experience of separation is projected back on the earliest experience of separation. Remember, spiritually, that to be separated is to feel estranged, to have that sense of anxiety and that desire for oneness. So the Oedipus complex is the backwards effort to re-experience union through the mother, instead of growing up and going through that individuality, that separation. Yeah, you're kicked out, you're separated. Go become an adult, and then find your own new lover or source of union. Don't go backwards. So this is one of the key challenges in the inciting incident, the call to adventure, is you have to be willing to separate from something that you don't want to separate from. But that's going to be key to growing up. Okay, let's now play one more clip. We're going to cross the threshold.
My, what a peculiar place to have a party. You know, Dino, we really shouldn't be doing this. After all, we haven't been invited, and curiosity often leads to trouble. Goodbye, Dinah. Goodbye. Well, after this, I shall think nothing of falling downstairs. What if I should fall right through the center of... out the other side where people walk upside down. Oh, but that's silly. Nobody... Oh! Oh, oh Mr. Rabbit! Wait! Please! Curiouser and curiouser.
Amazing scene. We love threshold crossing scenes. They're some of our very favorites, so don't shortchange yourself on this scene. When you go to the other world, make it freaking cool. Make it hyperdrive, stars go by. Make it you're going down the rabbit hole like you just saw. You're going through the wardrobe, one of our favorite scenes ever, going through the wardrobe, right? How about going through the mirror, the looking glass, going into the matrix or out of the matrix, through the phone. These threshold crossings are some of our very, very favorite scenes, and they represent going into another world. Notice that things start to get weird. Things go upside down. Things start acting funny. This is starting to help us prepare and understand that we're going into a different reality. We're going to a reality of dream. She's fallen asleep. Remember that Dorothy actually gets hit in the head on her way to Oz? She's in herself. Dorothy and Alice are both in themselves. So this threshold crossing is into the realm of dream. And that's a really good way to understand magic and the Force. This is an experience of psyche, an experience of life that is in a different paradigm than the waking normal material world. So we're going to go into the realm of dream, into the realm of dead, etc., etc. So here we see we're also going to cross a bunch of thresholds to get there. We need to feel like we went somewhere. So that gives us that strong feeling of division from the world above to the world below. Make it a real transition. When we go to Jurassic Park, they go through like 17 million gates so that you feel like we've gone through a bunch of gates and we've really gone somewhere. They fly, they go over an ocean, they go around an island, they go through this gate and that gate. And you notice that she went through like 27 doors. These symbolically reinforce the experience that we are going across a threshold. And what is a threshold, by the way? Threshold is at a door. A door, this is just a threshold. Entry to a door. And it's just a metaphor. And I want to get your minds on this too. Think about metaphor this way. I'm not trying to teach you guys the symbolism of a dictionary. You're never going to remember an encyclopedia of symbols. I just want you guys to start thinking symbolically about everything. A ceiling is a ceiling. A floor is a floor. A wall is a wall, a door is a door, a window is a window, right? They are immediately metaphorical. This whole inability to see metaphor was true to C.S. Lewis, who told J.R.R. Tolkien that he thought a tree was just a tree, wood and sawdust and stuff like that. And J.R.R. Tolkien did what any man would do when another man has deeply offended him. He went home and he wrote a poem. And that poem is called Mythopoeia. And that poem converted C.S. Lewis. And it converted him to not reduce things to the materiality. He's pointed out, look, a tree connects heaven and earth. Just look at a tree, just the image of it itself. You see above connected to below. A tree just there in its image is an expression of above connected with below. It's a vocabulary. It's an immediate meaning. And when I write a story, he said, I can write metaphor into my story. Easy. So if there is an author, if there is a divine author, a God of any kind, it would be 10 million times easier for that author to write metaphor into the story than it would be for me. And I, as a sub-creator, as a creator in the image of a creator, I write stories with metaphor. So I believe the author is writing with metaphor, and I believe that the metaphor around me is the language of the divine and always has been. And we used to speak this language, we used to listen in that language, and we've lost those ears, we've lost those eyes. So, C.S. Lewis understands this, gets it, converts to the valuing of metaphor. They call it mythopoesis. They form a group called the Inklings. They get together to study myths so they can write myths, study epics so they can write epics, and they end up writing the first fantasy novels, the Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia. And together they give birth to the entire fantasy genre. By studying myth to write myth, by bringing an emphasis on metaphor. Okay, so let's keep going. Now, we've crossed the threshold, we're overwhelmed, we empty the cup, often some type of blindness or disillusionment. Neo pukes. We've got to empty the cup to fill it back up. For the Masons blindfold their initiates so they can be disoriented, so that they can be reoriented. The crossing of the threshold must be disorienting because you're about to reorient your characters into a totally new reality. Okay, and with that, do we mind playing the next clip? Thank you.
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my!
Put 'em up. Put 'em up. Which one are you first? I'll fight you both together if you want. I'll fight you with one paw tied behind my back. I'll fight you standing on one foot. I'll fight you with my eyes closed. Oh, pulling an axe on me, eh? Sneaking up on me, eh? Why?
Here. Go away and let us alone.
Oh, scared, huh? Afraid, huh? How long can you stay fresh in that can? Come on, get up and fight, you shivering junkyard. Put your hands up, you lopsided bag of hay.
Now, that's getting personal, Lion.
Yes. Get up and teach him a lesson.
Well, what's wrong with you teaching them?
Well, I hardly know him.
Well, I'll get you anyway, Pee-wee.
Shame on you.
What did you do that for? I didn't buy them.
No, but you tried to. It's bad enough picking on a straw man, but when you go around picking on poor little dogs.
Well, you didn't have to go and hit me, did you? Is my nose bleeding?
Well, of course not. My goodness, what a fuss you're making. Well, naturally, when you go around picking on things weaker than you are, why, you're nothing but a great big coward.
You're right. I am a coward.
So, who is Dorothy meeting? She's in her dream, right? This is her inner lion. This is her inner Tin Man. This is her inner Scarecrow. So when the lion is looking for courage, that's her inner lion looking for courage. And when she's meeting her friends on the road, she's integrating them into her psyche, right? So she's meeting a lion looking for courage, the lion finds courage, and really this is all in her dream. This is about her finding courage and integrating courage. So the same thing with the Tin Man, same thing in the heart, and the Scarecrow in the mind. This is when Neo is training. This is when we're building the super suit. This is the initiations, when we're learning magic for the first time. This is when we are adding helpers and tools and skills. We are growing. We're learning a whole new way of doing things. Learning how to fly around as Spider-Man. Learning how to make my Iron Man suit. I'm developing that shadow that I've never let grow. All those skills and abilities. Maybe you want to be a dancer and you've never let yourself dance. So now dance, and then you let it out, and it feels amazing, and it's growing, and it's expanding. And we don't even remember the plot at this point. We normally forget about the plot entirely in the first half of Act 2. Just so the character can grow and expand and become awesome. And then, unfortunately, and by the way, a couple notes. This is, we call this the trailer moments for Blake Snyder. This tests allies and enemies period, or the increasing complications. This is a time where we're building up ourselves, but it's also a time when we're getting rid of our last self. And I want to add this story. So Inanna, when she goes to the underworld, this is the earliest heroine journey, the earliest hero journey. She is the queen of the journeyers. And so she goes to the underworld, and on her way down, she shows up at the gate. She says, you know, the person at the gate says, "Who are you?" And she says, "I am Queen Inanna." And he says, I don't think so. And she says, okay, fine, I'm nobody. All right, take off a piece of clothing and you can come through. And so there you have the situation. So you have each step, she has to remove a little bit more of herself on her way down, on her way in. So here we have the moon going to dark, the sun going to dark, the year going to dark and cold, the corpse that's letting the last of its life out. So while we're building up the new self, we're also getting rid of the old self. And this will take us into the nadir. And we'll run short on time, so I'm going to skip the clip on this one. This is the next stage of the journey. This is when you get to the bottom. So for Inanna, she gets to the bottom, and there she sees her sister, Erish Kegel, who puts her on a peg where she hangs for 3 days and 3 nights after her sister gives her the evil eye. Pop! And she dies on the cross. Hangs on the cross for 3 days and 3 nights until, long story short, the water of life and the bread of life are sent to her. And then she consumes it. This brings her back to life, and she immediately goes into labor and immediately begins her return journey. So as she goes into labor, as she begins her return journey, we see that there's this transition at the bottom. Deader, back to life. Same thing with Osiris. Way down to the underworld, at some point, we're going to change direction, right? This is the winter. Colder, darker. And then the winter solstice. Light starts coming back. Life starts coming back. Midnight, right? Day, darker, down to midnight, change direction, right? Coming back. The moon, waning, down to empty. Gets to empty, coming back, okay? Fascinating, right? This is the most important moment in all story structure ever. This is Christmas. These are the biggest holidays. This is the magic of magics. This is when life goes from dying to coming back, dark from darkening to coming back. This is the magic. In California, in LA, this is when the Chumash shamans are doing a dance to make sure that when Slo'u is playing dice with the eagle, when Coyote and the eagle are playing dice, that the game is not lost. This is when all things can go crazy. Because what if at the winter solstice, things just kept getting darker? What if at midnight, things just kept getting darker? This is the magic. It's got to be turned around. The magic of turning around of the light. And these narrative structures of the sun, of the moon, of the year, of the month, of the day, these narrative structures then inform our mythic narrative structures, our spiritual philosophies, and ultimately our movies and our story structures, and all the way until you're talking about the story structure for an Airbnb adventure. So this nadir, the changing of directions, this is when the bull is decapitated, the Minotaur is decapitated in the innermost chamber by Theseus. But what is happening when you decapitate the bull? The bull has crescent horns. And these crescent horns represent the moon. So the decapitation of the moon is the last sliver going out. But then in Crete, where they tell the story, they also drink from horns, and they drink from bullhead-shaped drinking vessels called rhytons. And so the point is that this is the last sliver, but also the first sliver. The going out of the last sliver represents the death of the ego, the death of that previous self, the death of the king. And then the new sliver is new life, new elixir. That's the sword. That's the grail. That's what we need. That's the solution, the insight, the idea that you're going to come back and save the day with. But in the middle is emptiness. And so I want to point out that to extinguish, the word for extinguish for the Buddhist is nirvana. And this leads to enlightenment. So the going out of the light and the coming on of the light are in relation to each other, just like the nadir. And in the middle is emptiness, sunyata, emptiness, or anatman, emptiness of self. So the idea is that literally you can see Buddhist enlightenment encoded in the last sliver of moon, the emptiness, and the first sliver of moon, nirvana, extinguished, emptiness, enlightenment. These are the insights that he's going to bring back to the world to save the day, okay? So now, we've done this, now we're going to take the next step. Now we're going to begin our return journey after the nadir. So with the return journey, and by the way, best nadir example, Green Night in this last year. Winter solstice, Christmas, New Year, those were all the same day for the Anglo-Saxons, and you see this in the movie Green Night. Okay, so we're now to our final stretch. I've got 4 minutes. I've got to speed up. That's how this works. After you've got the thing, after you got the elixir, you're going to run. After you got the sword, you've got to flee. This is a journey, and I'm not going to play the clip, but the clip I was going to play is Batman escaping with the elixir and his girlfriend so that he can then save her and save the day. So this is the escape with that thing you need. You've got the insight, you've figured out what you need, but you've got to now come back to the world and deliver it. And what's going to try and stop you? The forces of regression trying to keep you from getting out of yourself. Okay, but we got to speed this up, and this is common for the return journey, for the magic flight. It is sped up. Mostly, although every now and then they've started experimenting with longer Act 3s, such, for example, in Shape of Water and even one of the Star Wars movies. But typically, Act 3 is when you got the thing, let's speed up, wrap things up, and have an exciting finale. So now that's the return journey. Now we're going to arrive, and I'm going to quickly tell you the great elements of a great climax. I'm not going to play the clip, but the one I wanted to play was Beauty and the Beast, when he defeats Gaston at the precipice. So first of all, we're at the ledge, we're at the precipice, coming back into the normal world from the world we've been venturing into. Now we're going to fight the person at the boundary, that's Gaston. And then we're going to have the death and resurrection so we can see the new self that he has become, that the beast has become. We're going to have the delivery of elixir, which is going to be the kiss of love. And then it's going to transform him, transform the world. So these are the elements. Cross the return threshold, defeat the primary resistance, deliver the elixir, demonstrate that you're a completely new self, and transform the world. And this movie does it all like that. And so it's super climactic and super powerful and super fun. And then once you've done this, you're in a new world. Now, you guys can compare these to all the movies you want to compare them to. You'll see these key elements over and over and over again. And we got to wrap up now in just a few minutes. So once you get to the new world, final pieces, wrap things up, denouement, the untangling of the final knots, right? Okay, there's our quick journey. Getting very quick at the end. And of course, you think of the death of Neo, so you see his new self. You see the death of Harry Potter, sorry, spoilers, and you see his new self, the climax, right? These are the recurring key pieces. All right, so that's the journey. Right? We start at home, call to adventure, cross the threshold, go on the transformation, hit the nadir, the old self dies, the new self is coming back, delivery of the elixir, save the day, across the return threshold, back in your home world, things transform. Good job. Okay, now with our last 2 minutes, let's get back to where we started. So, on this journey, what have we found? First of all, we found that done right, this is not about preserving the status quo. This is about changing it. This is about transforming the world as it is into the world as it should be. And what transformation? Is it about further marginalization? Absolutely not. This is a journey about integrating the marginalized. This is a journey about restoring the vitality that's been left out to the world because that's the only thing that can save it. About integrating the opposite that you've left out of yourself. Is this structure lacking in femininity? Well, only in the way it was studied in the past. In reality, when you add back in the feminine, you get whole new dimensions. You start to realize that the return journey is the birth journey, for example, and that's just the beginning. We talked about the Rosa Parks example. It's essential that as you guys learn more and more and more about the hero's journey and you write this stuff, don't use dated recipes. It'll hurt the world. And you as artists can be heroic, truly heroic. Help the world. And the key to doing that is actually making sure that you model a great reality. And to do that, you can't use the old recipes. So challenge the hero's journey and see how powerful it can be, how much it can do for you, but don't accept the old recipes that continue to marginalize women and races and genders. And if you're into that and you want to make a difference and you want your art to be impactful, and not just for art's sake. Look, we love art for art's sake. Love art for art's sake. But it also gives us the vision into which we live. And if you want to be impactful, if you want to make a difference in the world, there are few ways you can do that as powerfully as you can as a storyteller. And that's the power that we're focusing on in my classes and in my department at Hussian College. I hope you'll come, and I hope I'll see you there. Thank you to Grid for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to hearing from any of you.